In fact, I've gotten somewhat infamous inside of my company for saying it's all risk management. At the enterprise level, it's all risk management. All process is risk management. The Agilist form of Occam's razor, the updating of Occam's razor, is simply this. From an Agilist point of view, if you have a risk, you damn well better do something about it. But if you don't have that risk, don't do something about it. Do nothing for formality's sake. That's the Agile attitude about process. If you don't have that risk, then take that part of the process out. Don't do those things. Do nothing for formality's sake. But if you have the risk, then by God, you had better introduce something that's going to help manage that risk. If I don't have personnel risk, then I don't have to have really strict role definitions and a really strict staffing plan. But if I happen to have 100 people spread across 3 different sites, maybe I do need that in order to manage the risks. And so this is the fundamental thing about the relationship between risk and process. Go ahead.
I was just going to observe that there's another Agile aphorism which is very full square in this place, which is Yagni.
Yes, you ain't going to need it. Y-A-G-N-I. You ain't going to need it. And that thing, again, comes down to this. If you don't have the risk, don't put something into your process that's not going to have a payoff. As I said a little bit earlier about documentation, never produce something which is not consumed. That is the Agile Occam's razor that cuts right through all of the fat on a process. And yet, what that also means is it puts a burden on someone running an enterprise Agile organization to make sure that they indoctrinate people on how to do risk profiling. People have to be trained on how to do risk profiling, because on the basis of the risk profile for a project, that is how you will configure your process. One of our customers last year contracted with us to help build their enterprise Agile process. And they wouldn't listen to our advice, and they decided that what they wanted to do was very traditional, and that is they wanted to sketch it very large. They wanted to sketch every possible thing you could possibly do, and then they wrote a clause that said, and throw away anything you don't need, and scale it down. And we told them that's not a good way of doing it, because by default, because people aren't usually trained into how to assess their risks, they won't know how to cut it down. So what you'll get is everything. And then it will be just as slow and cumbersome as we have traditionally always did. The art of doing Agile process is start with the absolute core minimum that addresses the risk that everyone has, and then map. And I've tried to do a little bit of it to just be indicative here. This particular outline is the outline that I try to train my staff into how to do risk profiling. 17 different categories of risks in 6 different families. And I won't go into this in great detail, but we can talk more about it during the questions if you want. But notice this. When we talk about relationship risks in the business side, a lot of that has to do with the roles that we recognize. If I don't have a lot of relationship risks, I don't need strict role definitions, because I don't have that risk. Regulatory risk. A lot of the reason why you have reviews is because of regulatory risk or other kinds of global risk. If I don't have those risks, do I need those reviews? Demand risk, not sure that anybody really wants that feature. Well, that's really the reason why we do vision and business case. But if I'm absolutely certain that those are things that are going to be useful, that are high demand, do I really need to do those things? And it goes on through all of these different things. There is a mapping from all these different categories of risk. If we can train people how to do risk profiling, put that at the center of what Enterprise Agile is, it drives everything else. Does it make any sense? And so there's a discipline of risk profiling that we have to put front and center. If we have that, then we can actually sketch minimum, and we can sketch a set of rules that say, if you have this risk, then this is a set of practices that actually help you manage that risk. Add that into your process. If you have managed the risk, you're 5 iterations into your project, and you have managed that risk, and you now assess in your risk profile, I don't think we have that problem anymore. Take that part of the process out. Strip it down. It's the way that we constantly are trying to right-size our process. And when we have little tiny teams, we don't have to worry about that, because we have very few little things, and we have very few risks, and we mainly have managed them inherently. But as problem scales to the enterprise, our risk goes broader and broader. Our risk profile gets more elaborate, and hence you have to have a more sophisticated sense of what process is about. It's all risk management. Every single thing is justified by the risk that you have, and if you don't have it, don't do it. It's okay? That's something I want to offer you, this particular outline for risk profiling and this association between risk management and process. And so, really it's not true that we don't do risk management. We're rather fanatical about doing risk management. It gets more and more necessary to be fanatical as you actually start scaling up to the enterprise. And so you have process. And you have flow. Here's a model of the basic Agile rhythms. Well, Agile doesn't do planning. Nonsense. We definitely do strategic planning. That's where we do vision. That's where we do our first cut at the scope and our backlog. And that's where we do our top-level strategic estimates, our low-fidelity estimates. We definitely do strategic planning phase. It's just that ours takes on the order of weeks, not months. Days, not weeks. And then we get into our major rhythm. There really are only two phases. When we talk about process models, and when we talk to, as our clients oftentimes are, the project management offices in large organizations, when we talk to them, they oftentimes want to say, well, where are the phases? What phases do you go through? Where are my phase gates? And the answer is there's really only one natural phase gate, which is a go, no-go decision here. Does this project make good business sense now that we have the vision, now that we have a sketch of the business case, and we have an initial scope? Does it actually look like this is going to pay off, or should we actually go back and rethink this whole thing? After that, it's just one phase, the tactical execution phase. Now it has texture, but it doesn't have phases. These are actually non-phases in here. And I won't talk too much about this unless you ask me questions a little bit later. The priority triangle, risk again plays a very important part in there. Talk about that again if you ask about it.